Welcome to Terror in Tandem, a podcast about finding entertainment in the macabre. Hosted by the knowledgeable and lovable Laura and Richard Mathiasen. Each episode, we discuss the horror genre, from books to film to TV and beyond. Sometimes, even from the beyond, you guys. You can find us online at terrorintandem.com and on Instagram at terrorintandem. You know, we try new things. They don't always work.
I just want to give a shout out because today we're recording on our music producer's birthday.
Oh, we are the incredibly talented Dave Sisvanek.
Happy birthday, Dave.
Happy birthday, Dave.
He is traveling internationally right now. I won't say where.
Safe travel. Yeah, well, I mean, he'll be mobbed.
Yeah, he sure will.
If we give his location, the people will just swarm to him.
Absolutely.
Like Harry
so
Styles.
we're going to keep his privacy
and also
private,
like Harry Styles, he has been asked to stop spitting on Chris Pine. That's a totally different story.
Exactly. So I hope that you can spit on another attractive actor.
Yeah.
Today and every day.
Plenty of Chris's to spit on. How did we get here?
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Dave. So, what are we doing today, beloved
Oh,
co-host?
we're just jumping right in.
Oh, well, I mean...
How are you?
I am... okay. You know what? Actually, I did want to mention... we saw one of our recommendations yesterday.
We did.
Our January recommendations. And
Thregan.
Yeah, we did.
Or I guess it's M. Thregan.
It's M. Thregan. M. Thregan.
I always thought it was M-E and then the 3.
No,
but
it's just M.
I
Thregan.
guess it's M. Thregan.
M. Thregan.
We did see it in theaters.
And I'll say...
we do. We pay with our own cash money.
Yeah. That we get from our sponsors.
No, it's our own cash money that we spend on these movies. For
what,
you
don't
listener.
Think Uncle Jason's Knives and Blades is giving us movie money?
Not anymore.
Myers Massmongers isn't paying them bills?
They just got in trouble.
Oh, gosh.
So they're shuttering for a couple months.
So problematic.
Yeah, we saw Me Thregan.
And, you know.
Or M. Thregan.
What were your thoughts?
My thoughts were that I needed it to be rated R. There was a lot of missed opportunities with the what she had the potential of being and doing for violence and horror sake. I would not classify this as a horror movie per se.
Interesting.
Yeah, I guess I would.
I mean, it follows a very proud tradition of technology gone amok, from like Proteus to the Child's Play remake.
Well, in our upcoming episode about dolls, I'm sure we will be covering Megan.
Yeah, I'm sure too. I agree with you on every point you made. I enjoyed the movie. I really did.
It was entertaining.
But I think if you're gonna go with a concept as bonkers as Megan, and they did do, there was a bit of Paul Verhoeven RoboCop type satire.
There was definitely RoboCop vibes.
There were, you could tell it was inspired.
Also Terminator vibes.
But it was inspired by that sort of, the Hollywood response to hyper capitalism of the 80s. And yeah, exactly. You know, you got that feeling in movies like Alien and Terminator.
I guess my biggest problem with it was that all of the commentary, whether it be social commentary or familial or grief, they never really did a good job exploring it enough. They touched on too many different broad concepts. It sounds very superficially.
It sounds insane to say this, but in a movie as legit bonkers as Megan, it didn't go far enough.
And the movie Smile, for example, which really explored mental illness in a very deep way.
That was a hard R-rated movie that really pushed the envelope and went places.
They took one area and dove into it as opposed to
you're right,
floating on the surface of 4 different areas.
I will say the performances were good. M. Thregan itself, the doll, that was pretty fucking awesome.
And realistic and creepy.
Yeah,
and
I thought that was going to be the weakest part of the movie. That turned out to be the best part.
And also, none of the characters, I did say this immediately upon leaving the theater, none of the characters were likable for me.
Which I maintain was on purpose.
Yeah, and that's fine.
And fits
but
the
sometimes
sort of...
I have problems with
Oh, yeah.
those types of films
It's
where
hard when
everybody's a POS.
Yeah, you got nothing to hold on to.
Although I do love Succession because I'm going into it knowing everybody's a POS.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes, a point of sale.
One other thing I wanted to mention is, and this is to the community at large.
Hello.
I said the community at large, not you.
I was saying hello to the community.
Oh, hello.
At large.
Well, this is an admonishment.
Oh.
So you might not want to say hello.
How dare you?
Listen up.
How could you?
I know that sometimes people like to leave their homes and go to the movie theater. Okay? We're two people that like that. But it's not an extension of your living room.
Oh, yeah. God.
And when you bring in multiple boxes of takeout, a family-sized bag of peanut M&Ms,
a bunch of beers,
boxes of wine.
Yeah.
We see you. We see you for the 2 hours eating all of that.
I get it,
nonstop for 2 hours. And I'm not.
It sounds kind of legendary the way you're describing it.
I'm not fat shaming anyone because these people weren't at all overweight or out of shape.
But they had a full.
But they came
meal.
to party.
Yeah.
They came to a 2 p.m.
That is true.
Film in the middle of Massachusetts to party.
Yeah, and party they did.
Yeah, they sure did.
Yeah.
I think they probably ate some edibles.
Yeah.
And it just kicked in at the perfect timing.
But
you were not there to see a movie at that point. You're there to just hang out in your living room.
The way you describe it, it just sounds legendary to me. Shout out to
you
those
do
people.
You. I didn't say not to do it.
They
I said we see you.
We
know
their best lives.
When you bust out that bag of Cool Ranch Doritos.
I don't think they gave a shit
No,
whether we saw
but
them
we know what you're doing. Stop trying to hide it. Stop trying to hide it in your bag. You know what I mean? We can smell your hush puppies.
Yeah.
And also, this is a little movie theater etiquette. Please do not take your shoes off.
Oh, gross. I hate that.
I know you're reclining in a comfortable chair right now.
Yeah.
Don't take your shoes off.
Shoes on, mister. Shoes on.
You're still in GD Public.
So this has been Emily Post's movie etiquette.
It's not etiquette. I'm like I said, I'm just pointing out
it was an interesting experience.
This is not an extension of your living room, people.
It was an interesting experience to go to a movie at a regular movie theater and to have the people next to us go through a full multi-course meal, including alcohol, like a not insignificant amount of it. That's not something that's happened at every movie I've been to or ever.
Yeah, it was a lot.
It was something.
Because it was, they were sitting right next to us.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's basically like, where are the Oreos? That's the only piece that's missing.
Fucked up that they didn't share.
So I guess we're not hanging out with those guys anymore.
Well, we're off the Christmas list now that you outed them.
Well, speaking of living room, we're going to talk about Stephen King.
Hello.
This is our part 3 episode of our deep dive on Stephen King.
The one you've all been waiting for.
We're going to span 1999 to 2010. Arguably, for me, his weakest decade.
It's certainly an interesting time for
I
Stephen
didn't
King.
like it. I didn't like it.
This episode may be a little different than our previous Stephen King entries, which were largely us basically gushing over Stephen King. And we're going to be talking about a period of time that was creatively a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, I was like really busy during this time of life.
Oh.
So I feel
Being
like
cool.
He took a cool off time because he was like, you know what? Laura's not going to be able to read all my books.
You were up to a lot. See, that's never happened for me, so I just kept reading.
Yeah. So just to bring you up to speed, this is, right after his accident that I talked about in the last episode.
Oh, boy.
And I want to first start out with 6 pounds of metal had been implanted in Stephen King's body during the surgeries that he received.
Whoa. 6 pounds.
They were removed eventually and staggered removed, but he was in constant pain. And he's quoted as saying the orthopedist found all of this infected tissue and outraged flesh. The bursas were sticking right out like little eyes. I don't think he
me
can't
unhappy.
not be a horror
No,
writer.
God, the man could describe a sunrise in a way that would chill your blood. Yuck.
Yes.
Ew. Outraged flesh is a wonderful expression, though.
The bursas, though.
You
Bursas are so...
No one needs to hear that.
No.
And insert edit point.
So I'm just going to run through some of the novels and works during this time.
Yeah.
And
You know
we're
what?
going to get into those specifics, but I'm going to, talk a little bit about what was going on in his writing life during this time,
Let's
too.
hear a refresher.
So here are some of the highlights. Hearts in Atlantis, On Writing, a memoir of the craft, Dreamcatcher, Black House, Dark Tower, a couple of Dark Tower books.
Yeah, I finished the long-running series.
The Colorado Kid, Cell, Lacey's Story, Duma Key, and Under the Dome.
Yeah.
During this time also, he worked on a lot of collections, short story collections. So putting together some of these works that would eventually be novels into short story collections. Some of the novels that he wrote, he serialized, and then those were made into collected works.
It was an experimental time for him.
It was definitely probably trying to keep him paid while he was lacking a little bit of creativity and the ability to, manage through the pain.
It was, yes. I mean, it can't be denied that the accident and the extremely long, painful recovery process that followed deeply impacted not just the output, but his point of view on everything shifted.
Yeah,
after
exactly. So while he's healing from this accident during this time frame, I would say like major healing.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's still healing.
I remember these times very well. Really following updates on his condition and not that I've ever met him, but like genuinely worried that he was going to die.
Very worried.
Yeah.
He said that in 2006 was really when he started writing every day. And that's something that he's really spoken, and even the On Writing nonfiction, where he talks about his writing process and makes recommendations for others. That's one of the things he does. He writes every day, 2,000 words every day.
Yep.
It wasn't until 2006 when he finally got back to writing every day. But some things did happen positively for him. So previously, a New York Times reviewer called Stephen King a writer of fairly engaging and preposterous claptrap.
What a dripping with shit statement.
But I would say, as we emerged from the last decade that we discussed into this one, he started to receive greater recognition, which is sort of a double-edged sword here.
Well, these
because
things take time to catch up.
They do,
Yeah.
but then as soon as he started to get recognition, like really good recognition, in 2003 he won the Medal for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters from the National Book Foundation. It's a really big honor. And they're starting to look at his work and start going into his current work, which during this decade, as we said, wasn't the tops.
I'm gonna go deep into one of those. It's a book that he definitely, the success was his name and his name alone. That's why any of it happened. And he did suffer, I think, briefly a period of loss of sort of credibility for a little while,
or
because
he lost a lot of fans because
he had decades of
or they put him on pause.
Yeah.
That was what I did.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I just was that's not really something I'm interested in. I'm gonna put him on pause a little bit.
There was a period of time for me as well. I think when he was doing Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon and sort of branching out a little bit into other genres that I don't know. I took a pause too. That's okay.
The first book that I'm going to talk about is On Writing, and that's the nonfiction book. And he actually
one of his
started
books that I've read more than once.
Same, and also piecemeal.
Yeah, it's anyone who's ever put pen to paper or wanted to it's one of his best books.
He started writing it prior to the accident. So, he already had laid out the groundwork. So it was really just finishing up and an editing through.
It's a perfect time in his life and career to write a book like this, because he's been at this for 30 years at the top of the game, and it's time for him to mentor and share a bit.
And so this is called On Writing, a memoir of the craft. It came out in 1999, and it essentially is a little bit of a history, a little bit of a manual of how he writes and how he would, just share his process and experience on writing.
It's quite intimate, actually.
It very is.
Yeah.
It is. You'll learn everything about this accident in it.
Yes.
And just to give you sort of a quick what this book is really about quickly, he says that most people have at least some talent as writers and storytellers, and those talents can be straightened and sharpened with practice. He also says that the writer's original perception of a character or characters may be as erroneous as the reader's. And then stopping a piece of work just because it's hard, either emotionally or imaginatively, is a bad idea.
Yeah. It's a great book to keep around for renewing your motivation.
Absolutely.
It's like for the longest time he's written prologues to his books addressing Dear Reader and giving you that sort of fireside feeling that he's weaving a tale just for you.
Right.
And imagine reading a whole book like that.
Yeah.
And he really brings you into his home.
He does. Well, there's a chapter called CV, which is, curriculum
vitae.
Yeah.
Vitae.
And he describes how he began as a writer. He talks about his childhood and his mother and how his father left.
Oh, yeah. I remember the whole, didn't he? Yeah. It was very nerdy 1950s.
Yeah.
Shit. Yeah.
He talked about publishing early in magazines, how he met his wife. And then he also talks about his relationship with alcohol and drugs.
He's very,
when he got sober.
Yeah. He's very raw about that.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting any of that when I first read On Writing, how autobiographical I guess I should have expected that, but I was like, this is going to be a writing manual from Stephen King, and it was much, much more than that.
And some of the chapters, they're pretty clear on what they're about. Yeah. So you could always just pick this up.
Well, it's kind of like two books in one in a way, because there are chapters that are writing prompts.
It's a bit autobiography and a bit writing prompt. Yeah. And also he does recommend a bunch of novels at the end,
it's like having a professor that maybe shares a little
class.
Too much.
It is a fiction writing class.
It really is. A master class.
There's a chapter or a section called what writing is. He compares writing to telepathy, in which the author must transmit information to the reader. That's funny.
Thank you.
He says that this is all possible and tells you how in the toolbox section, where he gives you practical advice about getting your writer's toolbox that needs to contain basics of vocabulary, grammar, and style.
That's something I like. I've always liked about Stephen King is, he has been an iconoclast. He has moved the genre forward. This genre that is often critically maligned. He's legitimized in so many ways, but he maintains this very old-fashioned, like Strunken white kind of mentality.
Oh, yeah.
If you're going to break the rules, you have to learn them first. And I totally agree with that.
Rules,
yeah.
Or
he really does advocate building a strong foundation, and that is only done through reading.
Yeah, you can't write an effective sentence without knowing how to write an effective sentence.
Without knowing the components that go into making one.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to know the ingredients to make a regular cake, and then you can build whatever you want on top of that, or experiment, but you got to know the basics first. And it's done in such a wonderfully conversational, light, interesting way that you barely know you're being taught something.
I'm going to, before I wrap it up with this book, I'm going to say that I really love it. I think it's a really great tool for emerging writers or people who want to refine their craft. But I also think it's really important to understand, what it takes for a writer of Stephen King's caliber to then reflect on how they came to be and what advice they would give to others that are pursuing that. Like, you
Highlighting
can't rush this type of...
The workhorse.
Yeah.
He's
been writing since the 70s.
Oh, and earlier than that.
A little bit earlier than that.
He's been, since a little kid, he was writing sci-fi stories,
successfully published, I think. 80s, with Carrie.
Yeah. It's also a wonderfully empowering and renewing book, I've found. When you're feeling creatively stunted or low, to pick up a book and read about the struggles of the most successful author of my lifetime is like, well, there are days where Stephen King has a tough time too.
Absolutely. I'm going to give you, before we wrap this up, I'm going to give you sort of the top 5 pieces of advice / quotes.
Oh, I'd love that. And listener.
Number 1, write with the door closed, rewrite with the door open.
Explain.
No.
Oh.
This is for you to interpret.
I get
as the writer.
Yeah.
And you really?
No, you write your first draft, on your own, but be open to other people's input when you're rewriting.
But I think that could be a literal too.
Oh yeah, writing the first draft of anything is the worst. You just got to shut your door, put your nose to the paper and get it done. And then rewriting is in my opinion, it's always much more fun.
The next one is writing is a lonely job. Having someone who believes in you makes a lot of difference.
We believe in you, listener.
Next, put your desk in the corner, and every time you sit down there to write, remind yourself why it isn't in the middle of the room. Life isn't a support system for art. It's the other way around. One of the really bad things you can do to your writing is dress up the vocabulary, looking for long words because you're maybe a little ashamed of your short ones.
What a stupendously germane observation.
The satisfaction that I gleaned from that recommendation from the master of his craft.
Worth it.
Remember that the basic rule of vocabulary is use the first word that comes to your mind.
Poop.
If it's appropriate and colorful. Brown poop.
Oh.
So that's on writing. And the final section of this book is called On Living, and that's really where he details his accident because it sort of came right at the tail end of him finishing this work. And I think it's just a really great examination of both King's craft and the craft of writing itself.
I mean, he is somebody who has always, at least to me, the way he's described his writing, it can't be separated from who he is.
No.
From it's an aspect, a foundational aspect of his character and personality. And in this very intimate, book where he is inviting you into his craft, you really definitely get a sense of that.
Yeah.
I love that book.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, so I'm gonna start with the fun one. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a book that came out in 2001 called Dreamcatcher. Now, Dreamcatcher is a turd of a book.
Well, let's be
Nope.
nice.
Nope.
Okay.
It is inexplicably bad. It's utter nonsense. 600 pages of absolute baffling stuff. And the reason for that, Stephen King in 2014, I believe, in an interview with Rolling Stone, copped to the fact that he was not a big fan of the book himself and that he wrote the majority, if not all of it, zonked out on painkillers from the accident. So he doesn't really remember it. And with that context, the book does make a little bit more sense. So, the TLDR of Dreamcatcher is 4 childhood friends in their 30s go out to a cabin, and they meet an alien, or like a person who's been inhabited by an alien, and this alien makes the person fart a lot, and I think they call it a fart monster. And there's also a really uncomfortable side story messiah thing with a developmentally challenged guy named Dudders that gets cringy. And yeah, so Fart Monsters and whatnot, it was a #1 New York Times bestseller. And it was made into a film directed by Larry Kasdan, the writer behind Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, it wasn't
the
good.
Director of The Big Chill and Grand Canyon, starring Morgan Freeman, Donald Sutherland, Tom Jane, Jason Lee, Donnie Wahlberg, Damian Lewis, Timothy
really
Olyphant,
great cast.
Tom Sizemore. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes long. And it is, I mean, this is just a real definite, like, Stephen King's name was on it. And everyone just sort of rushed. They grabbed the rights. They made this big movie. And the movie...
Donnie Wahlberg played Dudders.
Did play Dudders.
Dudders.
And it makes as much sense as the book does, which is to say, not much. Inexplicable that, you know, they spent that much money and got that many people involved. But it is, I can't recommend it. I'm not sorry I read it, and I'm not sorry I saw the movie, because they're wild. I remember reading the book and just being like, what on earth is this?
Yeah.
Then, you know, many years later, Stephen King talking about the effect that the opiates that the doctors were giving him in the wake of this, his body being crushed. Yeah, I don't think I could write anything half as good as Dreamcatcher. So, you know, all of this is tongue in cheek. I love Stephen King, and I love most of what he's written. It's a shocking book because it's an utter piece of shit. And to come from one of my favorite writers of all time, it's actually kind of wonderful, honestly, that he made something that was so confounding, and yet everyone jumped on top of it because Stephen King...
What's interesting is he comes out with On Writing, and he's like, here's how you can be a successful writer. And then like a year later, he publishes
Dreamcatcher. It's bad, everyone. I mean, if it were like 250 pages, sure. It's like 600 pages long. And
well, do you have any other insights about it or anything interesting?
Did I mention Fart Monsters? No.
Okay.
I don't. Its mere existence is proof to me that the universe is chaos.
Well, my next is called Black House.
Ooh.
Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I have not read it. It is on my to be read pile. Right now.
And listener, this is the pile that can be seen from space. The one you've read about in the news? Yes.
I did not want to read this novel until I reread The Talisman, which I did recently.
Yes.
Last
and since
year,
then,
I
unfortunately, one of the authors has passed.
Yes, Peter Straub.
Rest in peace.
So this is a sequel to The Talisman, The Black House, which was published in 2001. So Jack Sawyer, the main character, is now in his late 30s and has taken early retirement from the LAPD. So he eventually became a cop.
Mm-hmm.
And he moves to a small town in Wisconsin.
He's all grown up now.
He's got no memories of his adventures when he was 12. That was part of the...
probably for the best. That was a rough year.
Yeah. And that, you know, the Talisman is the parallel universe in where he saved his mother's life. Mm-hmm. But a series of murders involving young children force him out of retirement. And there's more than just murder happening. So Jack must retrieve his childhood memories to rescue the latest victim of this killer.
Now, I've not read this one either, but I've heard very, very good things.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating because it came out the same year as Dreamcatcher.
The killer's evil overlord is a powerful force from the End World,
Uh-oh.
and it's in Roland,
Yeah.
the Gunslinger's universe.
It is very heavily tied into the Gunslinger books, which, what a segue.
Yeah, you're going to be
Why don't
talking about that.
We take a little breakity break and
Yeah.
then come back and we'll launch into,
Roland's universe.
Dark Tower. Okay. Welcome back.
I'm not ready.
Oh. See, when you said I'm ready.
I know. I'm ready. For real.
Welcome back.
Hi.
Hey, one last thing I wanted to mention about Dreamcatcher is that was not the original title. The original title
Poopcatcher?
was Cancer,
Oh.
and it was the always dependable and always welcome Tabitha King who said, why don't you workshop that one? I'm going to go with you, Tabitha. Dreamcatcher's a better title.
So you want to get into
The Dark Tower. Yes. Now, here's the thing. My gosh. So Stephen King has been writing The Dark Tower for decades. And it's just the series that he's never going to finish, you know?
Yeah.
And as a Stephen King fan, and it's one of my favorite of his stories, I will cop to a very shameful thought that I had after his accident. It wasn't the first thought, but it was a thought I had of, oh no, he's never going to finish The Dark Tower. Fans of The Wheel of Time will certainly understand that. Robert Jordan passing before
Or
finishing the series.
the Songs of Ice and Fire.
Possibly, yeah. We'll see. George, let's keep focused and keep taking those vitamins. So, thinking, oh God, he's never going to finish. Now, after the accident, he finished. And boy, did he ever. The last three main entries...
Finished all over the place.
The last three main entries of The Dark Tower are wild. And they have a pace and a feel to them that is almost frantic in nature. Let's just jump right in. So, the last time a Dark Tower book had come out, it was Wizard and Glass, which was a prequel largely. So it wasn't the last time that the story had really been moved forward was 1993's The Wasteland. So that's a long time. Think about the only new entry. Wizard and Glass is fantastic, but it largely takes place in Roland's past.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're really waiting to see what's the next thing for Jake and Eddie and Susanna. So that picks up with 2003's Wolves of the Calla, the fifth book of the Dark Tower series. Now, this book has one of my favorite vibes of any of the Dark Tower books. It's very much the Seven Samurai or Magnificent Seven, whichever version you've seen.
Mm-hmm.
It is that with werewolves and Roland's Quartet. Plus, he brings in Father Callahan from Salem's Lot.
Nice.
Ties that together. And Stephen King's multiverse starts to really come together around book 5. It's pretty nuts that Father Callahan shows up and becomes a major player. Now, it's in Wolves of the Calla that not only does Father Callahan show up, but he and Roland find a novel called Salem's Lot, written by Stephen King,
Amazing.
And it details Father Callahan's exploits in Jerusalem's Lot.
Yep.
So that blows his mind. Now, remember, for those of you that have not read this, a main component of this book is that it mostly takes place in this sort of alternate reality of Midworld, but it also takes place in our version of Earth as well. That's where Jake comes from. That's where Eddie and Susanna come from. And Roland is able to like travel past. So some of this book takes place in New York. Some of it takes place in Midworld. Coming out the next year in 2004 is the sixth book, Song of Susanna. Now, I know I said that the story gets pretty nuts in the fifth book. It gets straight out crazy by Song of Susanna. The fifth book ends on a real cliffhanger. Susanna is possessed. She's taken. So the group kind of splits up. Father Callahan and Jake go to try to rescue Susanna, while Roland and Eddie go to visit our very good friend Stephen King, who is an author living in Maine.
Yeah.
Now,
wow, how meta.
A lot happens. Susanna/Mia is possessed. She's also pregnant with Roland's child, even though she's Eddie's wife. That is through complicated sex with an incubus/succubus that passed the seed from Roland to Susanna without the two of them actually having sex. Yeah, anyway, like I said, it gets real weird. So the postscript at the end of this book has an excerpt from the Diary of Stephen King and lists his death as June 19th, 1999.
The day of his accident.
Fucking morbid. Yeah. So Stephen King writes himself into his own book and then writes his death. And we'll pick up with that the same year with the final main entry, The Dark Tower, Book 7. Now, this one closes it out. This book is tough. It is the end of a very long journey for both Stephen King and the reader. There are parts of this book that are utterly heart-wrenching. As with any epic tale starring a cast of characters, not everybody makes it to the end. Now, what Stephen King has become so self-referential by this point, he's basically... there comes a point in this book right before the final denouement where Roland has reached the Dark Tower, this mysterious thing that has barely been explained throughout 7 books. Now, I should mention in Wolves of the Kala and Song of Susanna, some questions do start to get answered. You start to meet agents of the Crimson King, and things start to come together. It connects with the world god Gan, which readers of It will remember.
Right.
So I'm not going to give it all away, but right before the denouement, the ending, the big epic finish of this tale, there's a note from Stephen King that basically says, if you want to stop reading now and feel good about it, go ahead. Because he wraps things up in a way that is not necessarily what I'd call a happy ending, but it's a complicated ending that is better than tragedy.
Well, just to interject real quick, Stephen King has, many people will say things about his endings.
Yes.
And he always likes to quote Gordy in Stand By Me when they are told the story of the pie eating contest. And then they say, oh, well, what happens next? What happens when he gets home? And he's like, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, the end is the end.
The story was everyone barfing at this contest.
Yeah, that's the end of the story.
Why do you want to know what happens after that?
So.
Yeah, like, why do I need to know how Chewbacca got his favorite key ring?
So he always turns it around and says, how would you have ended it?
Yeah, that's great. No, I love that. I mean, honestly, you write a fucking 3,000-page epic and tell me how to fucking end it.
You write 40 novels.
Well, here's the thing. So he does offer the reader an outlet. Obviously, no one's going to take that. I mean, just I've spent years reading these books. I've been waiting. Stephen King braved death itself to finish it. I'm going to read to the end and be horribly depressed because it's a rough ending. It does end on a note of hope, but I will compare the ending a little bit to Inception in that it's very much open to interpretation, and some may find it very unsatisfying. It's not a neat ending, so it was something I had to sit with for a while. I've come to appreciate it. I've come to like it more over the years and through reflection. But it's not like a fan service user friendly ending, and I kind of appreciate it for that. Honestly, he didn't. Well, he sort of did wrap things up, and then he very purposely said, if this is the story that if you'd like it to end this way, then go ahead.
Yeah.
And this is how the story will end for you. It's a sort of Schrodinger's cat situation of like, if this is where you stop reading, then this is where the story ends. But if you keep reading, then the story continues. So anyway, he does finish The Dark Tower. It's every bit as strange and complicated as it always was. It ties into so much of his other work. I mean, by the end of the 7th book, you're getting references to short story collections and books you wouldn't have even considered. But it does make a certain kind of sense, and it is an ending of a sort. But I don't know. It's I'm very excited that Mike Flanagan has signed on with Amazon to produce a series of The Dark Tower, because I'm not sure people appreciate just how fucking weird this story gets towards the end.
Yeah.
And I'm very much looking forward, because nobody has been able to translate Stephen King as well as Mike Flanagan has.
It's a big undertaking.
Oh, it's of a lifetime. Yeah. I can't wait.
Well, the last one I'm really going to dig into is Cell.
Yeah. Right.
So
everyone's favorite John Cusack movie that we all saw.
This is 2006 Cell by Stephen King. And
it's actually a good one. I read that one.
I'm going to tell you first how he came up with this. He talked about that he came out of a hotel in New York City and saw this woman talking on her cell phone and thought, what if she got a message on her phone that she couldn't resist and she had to kill people until someone killed her? And then all of the ramifications of this idea started bouncing around his head. And then he was like, well, what if everybody got the same message? Then everybody who had a cell phone would go crazy. And he said, like, normal people would see this, and the first thing they would do is call their friends. So it would spread. Yeah. That's how it would be like a virus. And then later when he saw another guy that he looked like he was having a breakdown, yelling seemingly to himself, he actually had like earpods in.
Oh.
Not AirPods, because
like
they weren't.
Bluetooth.
Yeah, like a Bluetooth.
So, but if you didn't know that, it just looks like a man screaming on the street.
Exactly.
I mean, we've all seen that. We've all seen people like it looks like they're bugging out, and they are. They're just also on the phone.
So then he just became obsessed with writing, and it was like an instant concept. And he read a lot about the cell phone business and started to look at cell towers and really start to become more aware of everything around. So
well, it's disseminated in the same way as a virus.
Yeah, exactly. So it basically starts out with everything's fine in the world. Like things are on the up and up, actually. And
yay.
The main character, Clayton, is visiting Boston, and he just had like a big art deal that now he's going to be able to make money at his art. And then the Pulse happens.
Which, by the way, artists, if you're not making lots of money as an artist, what are you even doing?
Well, sometimes it's just for the art. Stop.
No, it's for the money.
So then he gets the Pulse, and now he and all of the survivors. So it's a sci-fi, like sort of apocalyptic virus. Digital virus, and everything's black, everything's dark, everything's chaos, everything's carnage.
Well, what does the Pulse do to the people that get it?
It infects them with the like desire to kill.
Yeah, it turns them into like rage monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
'It basically is just, you're done. Or else you have to kill people.
Yeah.
You have to become a monster, or else a monster's going to get you.
Yikes.
It's like animalistic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So once Clay realizes he can't escape, he goes back to his hometown in Maine, and he and his fellow like refugees who are trying to just do their best try to create like a safe haven.
I think at this point,
But it's not a safe haven.
no, it's a Stephen King book.
And it's a good one of this pocket of time.
It is. It's a fast,
It's
like
a solid one.
pulpy read. It's violent and, plot based more than character based, so it moves quickly.
Yes.
It's like it's a one and done,
Yeah.
It's a perfectly fine beach read.
It's a story that he wanted to tell and told it.
Yeah.
Told it well.
It does sometimes read
Oh,
like
hold on.
you're cranky.
I'm getting a call.
Oh. And hello? Uh-oh. Laura? Laura? Oh! Laura? So,
Hi. I'm okay.
that was harrowing. I'm going to wrap this up on my side with kind of a quick mention of another thing that happened in this time period was the brief reemergence of Richard Bachman, previously thought dead. And actually, no, he stayed dead. I think we talked about it in an earlier episode, how King, quote unquote, killed off Richard Bachman, saying he died of cancer, and wrote an obituary for him. So the premise of this is the conceit is that Stephen King found a Richard Bachman manuscript in his attic.
Yeah.
And gave it to his publisher. So it's kind of like it's not one of his longer books. It's about like it's another one of Stephen King's books writing about people with developmental disabilities.
And he had an alcoholic and abusive father. The character Claiborne.
Yeah, and that's all.
AKA
Clayton.
Blaze.
Clayton. Yeah.
Basically, this character Clayton, AKA Blaze, he was raised by an alcoholic and abusive father, and then he's the victim of a terrible accident, which leaves him brain damaged. And he's a big guy, but he's a gentle giant. And then he's sent to an orphanage where he's treated pretty badly, but he survives. And then do you want to sort of jump into where it goes from there and
so I mean,
the significance of the Richard Bachman character?
This was a manuscript that Stephen King had written before Carrie, so it's one of his earliest works. It is something he decided to release as Richard Bachman because he felt like the tone no longer fit who he was at the time. And it was more, it still came from him, but it was just separate enough to be Richard Bachman. And he just, I always felt like Stephen King was sad that Richard Bachman got found out. And over the years, he's really played with it, and he's had fun finding, quote unquote, these manuscripts of like The Regulators and Blaze. But Blaze to date is the last Richard Bachman that I think we've found. But who knows? Stephen King's got a big attic. Maybe there are some more manuscripts up there.
Maybe.
But it's an interesting, tonally it's a little strange reading one of King's earlier work at this point in his career because you're expecting a certain style that you don't quite get because it's like a blast from the past, which I think further, enforces why he decided to release it as Richard Bachman and not under his own name.
Yeah.
And Blaze. Yeah. Like you said, it's a curious time in Mr. King's life. And his output reflects that.
He died of pseudonym cancer.
Yes, he did. He had a bad case of pseudonym cancer. And men over 40 especially, if you are not checking...
check to make sure who's really writing your works.
Your pseudonyms in the shower every morning.
You better make sure that you're not plagiarizing.
Really get in there. And check your pseudonyms.
So, yeah.
Your nom de plumes.
We hope that you have understood this deep dive
Both your
of
pubes.
this decade of King's works. Our final episode in the series will be coming in a little while, and I have
Everything's
to say
eventual.
that it's going to be a really difficult decade for me to narrow down.
Yes, because
I counted 12 top works,
after this bit
and
of a
that's not
lull,
even the extensive list.
I mean, that's one of the most fascinating things about Stephen King is this late in life explosion of output that is not only prolific but really good.
And really like genre and subgenre shifting.
He is writing
and mastering.
He's writing like a man who has no tomorrow. It's incredible.
He's like writing like a man that has so many stories to tell.
And
doing it.
He's got to get them out.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Well, join us next time.
All right.
Bye. Terror in Tandem is written, produced, and recorded by Laura and Richard Mathiasen, and edited and mixed by Richard Mathiasen. Our theme was written and performed by Carrie Denver, and all other music was written and performed by David Suspanic. All opinions expressed on this podcast are our own and should be taken as such. Thanks for listening, and please remember to give us a like, a review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. We're sad.